Is this the most recent guidebook, Russ?
This is, it's one of the more recent ones. I think this might be the most recent one, at least that Dick Williams wrote.
It matters to me to connect with people that I care about through either routes I've done or routes they've done. It's all the more special when it's something that somebody did the first ascent of.
The aid route was Twilight Zone, which went up that kind of corner and chimney, and it cut left out here.
Especially, you know, such a wild feature.
We are on the GT ledge just underneath the Twilight Zone French Connection roof.
Like you're just kind of leaning out to that jump slot. Just grab that thing and then put, yeah. Clip it short, man. Don't even need it at all.
To kind of rewind my brain back there and to just imagine myself as Russ or the little crew in the Gunks, and just having the imagination and the vision and the audacity to think, like, can we climb out these roofs? The Gunks is a climbing area in upstate New York that's very highly concentrated. There's a couple thousand routes, overwhelmingly protected by traditional gear.
Literally most climbers who are out there who have basically learned how to climb in a gym and gone to sport climbing areas mostly, if they're not from the New York area, haven't a fucking clue about the Gunks. It couldn't be more different than it was when I was starting out, because the Gunks were absolutely an arena that every world-class climber came to test their mettle. It had the hardest collection of free climbs in North America in the early 70s.
So what about the Gunks in that time makes it as important as Yosemite or El Dorado?
In the early 70s, it wasn't like people just went up to overhangs and started climbing through overhangs. It became really apparent. I think Fuchs in 1967 was one of the big breakthroughs. That roof was an iconic roof climb, and everybody knew about Fuchs. And that also was a groundbreaking route that showed, like, man, some of these roofs can be climbed. Even though the grade didn't officially exist, there were more 512s in the Gunks than anywhere else, probably in the world.
So the original generation found the easiest climbs that would get to the tops of all the formations, just like mountains. But when I arrived, almost all of the obvious lines had been done. So if you wanted to push things, you had to look for the things that are more like today's sport climbing. So Russ was probably one of the main proponents, and he already had a piece of land here and built his house eventually, so he had a real foothold in the Gunks. I think still today he knows more about the Gunks and probably has done more routes than anyone.
This area, especially in the late 80s, was a stopping ground for pretty much every international climber that, and especially all the very good ones, the Wolfgang Gulicks, the Jerry Moffats, the Patrick Elanges, I could go on and on and on with that.
Basically, I just heard by word of mouth about the Gunks, and I knew that it was a different rock type and that there were these overhanging bands. So Fuchs was another iconic climb that kind of, I think, was a breakthrough. For most people, it's considered 5'11"-ish, but if you're small, your feet come swinging off, so it was like my first introduction to steep climbing.
This route is To Be or Not to Be, and it's 512C X, I guess. He's got 4 decades of trad climbing jokes. To Be or Not to Be?
Yeah. Tell me.
I thought it was 12C. It was
12D?
C.
C?
I thought it was 12 plus.
Fuck no. I put it on 12 plus, you'll hate that.
Fuck, man.
The Gunks would probably be more famous if it was grid bolted. But its importance to me kind of stands as Russ's importance to me. It's really important to have a historical reference and context. It effectively remains as it was. We're just losing things like that so quickly. within Russ is contained decades of American climbing history, international climbing history. The reason why there's been this skip over the gunks, there has the potential to be a skip over Russ, is that there's no storytelling around it. I mean, he's not jumping on Instagram or blasting out on Facebook. Unless you go searching, you miss all that. And if Russ dies, that just goes away.
Nice. Good sound. Nice. Good job, Sam.
So cool, man.
Good job.
That's fucking such a rad pitch.
It's a good one.
So check this out.
Getting strong now.
One forecast we looked at said 0% chance of rain tomorrow.
Yeah, you were looking at the forecast for Death Valley, California.
No, NOAA for your house.
Really?
Amy's forecast, 94% chance of rain tomorrow.
Well, that means a lot of uncertainty.
One of the first things that I was struck by when I walked in his house was all the photos on the wall. They're not anything special, but what they are a catalog of the people that are meaningful to him and the places that are meaningful to him. There's just a genuineness there that you just can't see on social media these days. I mean, horrible photos, but you just know that that was real. Those people were being real in a real place, and it was so memorable that Russ needed to print the photo and put it on his wall. I mean, the interesting thing about old photographs, old personal photographs, is that they weren't to show anybody. They were mostly to just record, and they were mostly for the person in the photograph and for the taker to just have that moment. It wasn't to just show thousands of strangers out on the internet. It was just to remember.
Tell me your thoughts on social media.
I hate social media. Hate's a little bit strong. I'm just not that interested in it. I really enjoy being around my friends and people and conversations around tables.
I don't think he needs the time for that. He doesn't need to try and communicate with people he doesn't really know, and he's really a great part. He emails, he'll call, he'll write letters. He wants to really connect individually, not in bulk.
Nowadays, people think they have an impression that they've got all this information from all over the world, but they're just snippets, and they're not real stories from real people. You might get an impression, but it's very much like an impressionistic painting or something. It's not filled in with any detail, and I think you get the most richness of impression from somebody telling a story.
We got Wolfgang put up the world's first. Now it's considered 9A, and you put, back in 91, and you don't have a sense of who that person was if you read it in a book. So to have the storytelling preserves the personality of rock climbing. It's not just facts and figures, it's, the soul of it. Storytelling, I guess, sort of is a way to push the soul of climbing, or the sort of underbelly, the fire of it, down through the generations.
Andy Salo is a good friend of mine, and he's a Gunks local, and he added his name to the distinguished list of first ascensionists in the Gunks by doing the hardest, longest variation, and it's the most direct, and it hasn't seen a second ascent yet, and I'd love to try it. it's just a special experience when you're placing your own gear on such an insanely steep route. That's what's really cool about the Twilight Zone buttress and about the roots on that thing and about how they fit into the history of the gunks and about Russ's place in that.
Yeah, Sam. They really support it. To an edge above that, to right facing flake.
Nice, Boone.
We're at the Lost City on the block, slaying top ropes. Most of these routes were put up as top ropes, and just first ascent is done that way. I mean, if you were crazy, you could probably solo it or lead it, but they're hard enough that it's fine to just top rope.
Within the first year that I started climbing in the mid-'80s, I read an article.
You guys are going to take your rope down?
Called Fool's Gold that Russ had written, and it was about him soloing. I believe it was Foops and Super Crack and Persistence. And they were, you know, hard 511s and 512s in the gunks. And the gunks was in the press a lot. One of 3 or 4 crags that was in the press a ton in the 80s. Russ was one of the first 513 climbers on the, in America, pushing the limits in the gunks and on the East Coast and around the world at that time. And so Russ was a bigger than life character when I met him a few years later to me, and it was kind of like, I was so excited to meet Russ, and we've been buds for 25 years.
But you got to make sure your toe is pointed north.
I mean, he's a climber's climber, he's a lifer,
You could have the best crags in the world, but if the people you're climbing with don't inspire you or don't have your back or whatever, like, then it doesn't matter. He's able to bridge all the gaps between all the new people coming out and all the people that are trying to do new stuff or just are happy going out climbing 5-6. Like, he's able to connect all those dots.
You can literally be friends and go climbing with your heroes because the climbing community still feels small enough to them that every single person matters.
Honestly, most of the people I climb with now, for sure, could be at least my child. I mean, in some cases, my grandchild. It's kind of screwed up. And the fact they let me even hang around, I'm honored. There's no way I can hang with the routes that my young friends are doing, but I can still hang out with them and I can do something next to them. I can, especially around here, it's very easy to do an easy route next to a super hard route. You build a community not based upon your ability of climbing, but just about your love for it and your passion for it.